What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm coming to you with Chris Fedor, Jimmy Watkins, after Game 2 of the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Boston Celtics, Eastern Conference semifinals. And boys, the Cavs won a game on the road. Jamie Bickerstaff's first win on the road in his playoff career as a head coach. And man, we've talked about all year long, or all playoffs long, I should say, that there's the cliche that the series doesn't start until the opposing team wins on the road. So I guess the series has started in this one, unless we want to consider last series didn't count at all. But Chris, you were in the building at TD Garden with me this afternoon, this evening. Talk to me about what you saw off rip, because this game kind of flipped a little bit, or more than just once.
Guys, I think it was one of the best games that the Cavs have played all season long. You know, given the stakes, given the atmosphere, given the magnitude, given the fact that it's the Eastern Conference semifinals. It's against the Boston Celtics, the East leaders, a team that is supposed to win the NBA championship this year, or at least get to the NBA finals. It was a complete performance for the Cavs. They did it offensively. They did it defensively. They had 6 players in double figure scoring. They shared the ball. And the thing that stands out to me about this one, guys, we talked a lot on the previous podcast just about what we think the best formula is to beat the Celtics. And we kept going back to the Game 2 performance by Miami. And in that game, Miami had to hit 23 threes. It was a game that felt a little bit fluky, right? It was a game that pointed more toward shooting variance. The Cavs didn't need that to beat the Celtics. That, to me, is the most impressive part of this. This was a complete and utter domination of Boston. And it felt real. It didn't feel fluky. It felt like they had attention to detail. It felt like they executed their game plan. They had a very good game plan going in. It felt like they were focused on offense. It felt like they were connected on the defensive end of the floor. They were closing out to shooters in a way that they didn't in Game 1 against the Celtics. It felt to me like the kind of performance, from the Cavs' perspective, that can be duplicated.
Yeah, I think 35 three-point attempts is a very interesting number to me on Boston's end. That's about 15 below their season average. And you could, I think there are probably some Celtics fans pointing to 8 out of 35 three-point attempts. And they might be talking internally about how, well, okay, we make 4 or 5 more of those, we're going to play better defense, we're in pretty good shape. But to Chris's point, it's like the reason for that is in certain moments, sure, some not great Boston offensive process, but man, the Cavs were playing with some vigor on the defensive end, man. The way we're closing out hard to either get really good contests on shots or just stopping people from taking them all together. And that forced Boston to be a driving team. And Evan Mobley we're going to talk a lot about Evan Mobley's offense, I think, on this podcast. But I watched the game back in little clips. No one scored an easy basket on Evan Mobley tonight. Right. He had 2 blocks and he affected countless other shots. I looked it up real quick. I think opponent shot 8 of 16 inside of 5 feet against him tonight. 50%. That is an elite mark of rim protection. He's 53.3% for the playoffs. That's another elite mark. This shouldn't surprise you. This is who Evan Mobley is, but it was just really noticeable going back and watching the Boston drives. He makes life so hard on some of those guys. And then, the balance scoring stands out. That I like when Chris asked Donovan Mitchell after the game about how purposeful it was that Donovan came out to facilitate instead of score. I think that's a really grown-up superstar decision that he made that clearly paid off. Look at all the different players that he empowered. Evan Mobley leading the pack. Again, we'll talk more about him, but like guys like Karis LeVert was awesome going to the rim tonight. Isaac Okoro only made 1 3, but 5 for 5 made himself an offensive threat off the ball without making a ton of jumpers, right? Like had a couple of nice back cuts when the Celtics were ignoring him. I still like this result doesn't feel replicable to me, but like this strategy, this approach as a path to competitiveness in this series absolutely feels replicable to me. Easier said than done. Boston's really good. They're going to be better, but it's a good plan and they executed it really well.
I think what the Cavs said that stuck with me is what they said after game 1. They talked about only having 48 hours to respond after game 7. Not a whole lot of time to go through game film and truly prep. Like, I remember when we were first doing predictions for the first round series, and I was talking to Chris on a podcast a little too early and asking him to make his prediction. He was like, wait, there's some stuff I got to look through. There's some things I got to get into to make sure like I'm giving the best information possible. And that's what it felt like for the Cavs. They were trying to get all the information while they were on the court in game 1. Then ahead of game 2, they had the time to not only practice the things that they went over in film the same night or the night after, but they were able to put it into display. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is like how they've been able to adapt. We've talked about it before. I said it when we were giving predictions. This is a team that has been back against the wall multiple times, been counted out, all of these things, but they continue to respond in decent ways almost every single time. And this was another time that they had not won on the road. They had struggled in Boston during the regular season, and they came and took and stole a win on the road at TD Garden, and now basically took away home court advantage because if you win 3 more, game 6, game 5, like, who knows? But I think what I wanted to get into, we can really break this down quarter by quarter because that's how it really went. First quarter was Evan Mobley. Got off started, got cooking, 11 points in that first quarter, and he got help from Donovan Mitchell facilitating and getting him started. Chris, Jimmy kind of alluded to it, and you asked the question to Donovan Mitchell. How important was it for you to see Donovan play as a star, knowing that facilitating was the best option in that sense, in that time of the game? And then Evan Mobley stepping up offensively. We talked about the players needing to step up as an entirety, and I wanted to say this before I get to your answer, Chris. Karis LeVert told Serena Winters with Bali after the game, he said, we've been hearing for the last couple of days that Donovan ain't have no help. So we just wanted to show that he's got help. And I know we had said that the Cavs needed to give him some help. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on Donovan in the first quarter and then Evan Mobley as well in that first period?
It reminded me a lot, guys, of the approach that LeBron James used to take to game ones in the playoffs or meaningful games in the playoffs. He would try and empower his teammates. He would try and build confidence in his teammates. He would try and get those guys going. Donovan is so smart. He understands some advantages that he's going to have in this series. And he knows that there are going to be opportunities throughout the course of a game where he's going to be able to get his, where he's going to be more aggressive looking for his own shot. But I think he understood coming into this game, it's more beneficial for the Cavs to get Boston's defense scrambling, to take advantage of certain mismatches that the Cavs are going to have throughout the course of this series, to see if they could make the Celtics alter the game plan a little bit. And the way to do that was to get other guys involved. And he also understands that if these guys get it going early in the game, Evan Mobley in the first quarter, Darius Garland was making some shots throughout the course of the game, Karis LeVert attacking the rim, Max Strus making some shots as well, Isaac Okoro making it so that the defense has to honor his outside shot, not passing those up, but being willing to take those. Donovan understands that if all of that happens early on, it's naturally going to shift the defense. It's naturally going to change the way that the Celtics view the quote unquote others on this roster. And that in turn can open things up for Donovan. All of a sudden, the driving lanes are a little bit wider. All of a sudden, the contested shots go from contested shots to more open shots. So I thought it was a really, really smart approach from Donovan, especially on the heels of game one. And I think we have seen throughout the course of this season, like, yes, Donovan can go for 40 at times. Yes, Donovan can go for 50 at times. But this is the kind of team that when they do it together and when other guys get involved and they're in rhythm, they're feeling good about themselves, they're playing with joy, confidence, they feel involved in the offensive game plan, it changes the way that this team functions. And I think when they're that level of involved on the offensive end of the floor and feel that much a part of it, I also do think it has a trickle-down effect to how impactful they are on the defensive end of the floor, too.
Jimmy, before you get into that, I'm sorry. I apologize. Before you get into that, I just wanted to jump in and based on what Chris just said, there's something that came back to my mind instantly was when Donovan had one of his best playoff performances in a Cavs uniform and they still lost. And after the game, he goes, well, I should have scored more, or I could have had this many points and this many assists, or I could have done this and this rather than just scoring. And for Donovan, like you said, Chris, who is so smart to have that knowledge right after a game and then execute that in the next series and figure out what that is that the team needed for that particular game. Today, it was facilitating and then getting yours. Another day, it might be just getting yours. Another day, it might be just facilitating. Who knows? But for him to be able to have all those levels of his game shows that he's not only evolving as a playoff player, but he's also evolving with this Cavs group. Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
It's really impressive to watch this guy score 122 points over 3 games and do it in a fashion where like he was really like MJ Kobe-ing it out there. We're just like, all right, if like that Orlando game in particular and in moments of that game 6 and game 7, where he's just like, all right, I got to do this. I'm dragging everyone with me. I'm going to the rim. I'm putting my head down. I'm either getting fouled or I'm scoring at the rim. Like that's one extreme end of the superstar spectrum. And then for him to sort of recalibrate after game 1, where I think he tried to do that a little bit and recognized maybe other guys out of rhythm. And I think also recognized, did a little self-inventory and said, man, I'm tired. Like, again, I mentioned it after game 1, like he was really huffing and puffing during moments of that second half. So I think he came into this game and said, I want to empower my teammates. I think there's probably a small layer of it too. It was like, I want to see what I have here. Like, who can step up in this hostile road environment where we really need this game. And I also want to conserve energy against a team that makes you do more on defense, against a team that plays with more pace than the Magic like to. All of those factors, I think, played a role there. And again, we talked about how replicable is this result. Like, how many times is Evan Mobley going to score 21 points? I don't know. How many times is Karis LeVert going to score 20 points in the series? He had 21 as well. I don't know. How many times is Darius Garland going to shoot? Was it 4 for 5 for 3? By the way, he should have taken more threes. I don't know. But like the fact that they do it once, the fact that Donovan empowered them to do it once makes it more likely that it'll happen again. Like that he's not just giving them so much confidence by trusting them to do that. And for them to come through in this situation against this team, I don't know, man. It makes your mind wander places.
Yeah, and I want to keep going because I said we were gonna break it down by quarter, and I think that's a good way to go about it. So the second quarter starts, and we see this lineup, this rotation that I think I looked at Chris, and as soon as we saw it come onto the floor, I said, "What are they doing?" Because Marcus Morris Sr. and George Niang were the 4 and the 5 in that scenario. Say whoever you want was the 5 at that time, but it just didn't work. And the Boston Celtics got out to an 18-7 run. They started taking the momentum back after the Cavs had the lead after the first quarter. JB Bickerstaff needs to call a timeout and switch gears. And as soon as he does and takes George Niang out the game, things start to change. And the Cavs start to respond almost immediately. So, Chris, I wanted to get your thoughts first off on the lineup that JB Bickerstaff started with and how it kind of stagnated that lineup and they had to fight their way back to being even at halftime. And then also in that same vein, how the team responded after JB called that timeout to switch back to the lineup that he knew could work.
First of all, what do you want him to do? This is a 48-minute game. He has, nobody else to play backup forward. Who did you want him to play? Evan had just played 12 straight minutes to open the first quarter. He did everything for this team offensively and defensively. He was exhausted, clearly. Who'd you want him to play?
I would have wanted him to play Tristan Thompson. That's who I would have wanted him to play. Tristan with Marcus Morris Sr., not George with Marcus Morris Sr.
So Marcus Morris Sr.'s fine, George not?
Yes. Plain and simple.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I understand that line of thinking. All I'm saying is that, there aren't great options right now at the moment for JB Bickerstaff and the Cavs when it comes to the backup power forward spot. And I think everybody has to be willing to admit that. The guy who would be the best option to play the backup power forward spot is Dean Wade, who I believe is going to be back for Game 3 for the Cavs. But he wasn't available tonight. So you just have to kind of piece it together as much as you possibly can for a couple of minutes and hope that those couple of minutes don't kill you while you get some rest for Evan Mobley, while you get some rest for Isaac Okoro, while you get some rest for guys like Max Strus. I agree. The George Niang minutes weren't very good. But you know what? They also coincided with Donovan Mitchell being on the bench. And we saw it in Game 1. When Donovan was not in the game, the Cavs completely fell apart. And tonight, to start the second quarter, he was on the bench again, and Boston went on an 18-7 run. Now, is that George Niang? Is that the lineup that JB Bickerstaff had out there? Or is that the fact that Donovan wasn't out there at the start of the second quarter to hold that all together? There were a few different factors, right? At the end of the day, though, the Cavs, the thing that impressed me the most is that the Cavs were able to recover from that bad stretch. They didn't hang their heads. They brought Donovan Mitchell back in. They found the right working lineup, and they started to go on a run, and it was a new game at halftime, despite that terrible start to the second quarter. It's something that we're going to have to continue to monitor, though, when it comes to this series. The non-Donovan minutes have been very, very troublesome for the Cavs. He cannot play 48. That is clear. He was willing to play the final 24 of the second half if that would have been needed. It wasn't, because, Boston emptied their bench with about 5 minutes to go in the game, and then the Cavs were able to do the same thing. So he didn't have to go all 24 in the second half, but there was a plan in place to do that if necessary. Donovan was on board with that, and JB trusted Donovan as well. And Donovan obviously was feeling healthy enough and good enough when it comes to his knee to be able to do that for the betterment of the team if it was needed. But he can't play all 48. It's just not going to happen. So the Cavs are going to have to find something something that is a little bit more consistent, a little bit more sustainable in the non-Donovan minutes at the start of the second quarter, because those have been disastrous. It didn't lead to a loss the way that it did in game one. They recovered. They found the right solutions to that. But we understand that their margin for error is very, very small. And they have to find a way to function at both ends of the floor when Donovan's not out there. This team's too talented to crumble like that when Donovan's not out there. And maybe you're right, Ethan. Maybe part of it is JB needs to find a better lineup in the non-Donovan minutes where it just doesn't feel like an all-out punt.
And I think it also had to do with who the Celtics had out there, because there was no 5. I think we can all agree that Marcus Morris Sr. is not a 5. George Niang is not a 5. And yet the Celtics had Al Horford and Xavier Tillman Sr. out on the court. Obviously, Xavier Tillman Sr. plays bigger than he actually is. And I just think playing small while they were kind of playing big was not a good matchup for them. And it showed itself because they tried to go inside, and when they went inside, they were either converting in the paint or they were able to create space for the shooters. And that's when they had like 3-pointers in that quarter alone. So I think, excuse me, I think it's definitely something that JB needs to work on. And I think there's been proof that Marcus Morris Sr. and Tristan Thompson are a better pairing than George Niang and Marcus Morris Sr. But, Jimmy, I wanted to get your thoughts on that rotation, that lineup, and what JB could do going forward, but also how they responded and what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on like a 4-minute stretch that, granted, did waste a really good first quarter, but the Cavs recovered from and won by 20. But yeah, I mean, the Celtics, 10 of those 18 points came in the paint during that stretch, and I think that obviously had something to do with the fact that there was negative rim protection on the court. I'm not saying Tristan Thompson is Evan Mobley or Jared Allen, or even Evan Mobley or Jared Allen-esque. I think he could have provided a little bit more resistance there. And to the George Niang point, again, I'm going to get the subtexters waving their Sam Merrill towels here. What is the difference? I know George Niang is taller and theoretically and bigger, and theoretically should be a better rebounder. George Niang has, before tonight, had 8 rebounds in 92 playoff minutes. Sam Merrill had 7 rebounds in 66 playoff minutes, I think. Like, they're both going to get attacked on defense. They're both going to put you at a disadvantage rebounding-wise. Sam Merrill might make a shot. I think, again, at this point, I know Chris is already starting to get worked up over there. I'm not saying this is the answer. I just think it could be worth trying, given that George Niang has already given you nothing, and you could slide Max Strus to the 4, and we're just throwing stuff at the wall because, like Chris said, the non-Donovan minutes are really bad right now, so it's just not great. Maybe Dean Wade solves all this. I don't know.
You want to tell him that George Niang plays the 4 and Sam Merrill plays the 2, or should I? Because I know that's exactly where you're going with that.
I'm saying you slide Max Strus to the 4 in that spot, which, again, not suboptimal. But Max Strus has rebounded above his size in the playoffs.
Yes, but there's a specific rotation, and I think you have to understand, and everybody has to understand, that like when you start changing it up like that, there's a domino effect, right? So if you want to start the second quarter with Max Strus as the small ball power forward because you don't want to play George Niang at all, then that means you have to take Max out earlier in the first quarter, right? Then he can't play 9 minutes in the first quarter. He can't play 10 minutes in the first quarter. So then you have to find somebody else that's going to play those final couple minutes. Who is that? Sam Merrill? Is that what you're doing?
I was looking.
Karis LeVert?
I'm looking. Sure.
Okay.
Sure, Karis LeVert. Why not? Played well
All I'm
tonight.
saying is that every single move is going to create some kind of domino effect. And maybe that is it. Maybe you just take Max Strus out earlier than usual in his rotation, and you send him out there at the start of the second quarter, and you play him at the small ball 4 spot.
I just think Max Strus already played in this spot tonight, though. Like, he was already in the game when this happened. So
I just think what you're bringing up in terms of like the minute allocation with George Niang and Sam Merrill, those aren't correlated in any kind of way.
But if Max Strus is already in the game, Max Strus is already in the game. So we're just sliding him.
Again,
I think
go ahead.
I just think we saw J.B. Bickerstaff try a lineup that I don't think we've seen. We saw him try a lineup that we didn't think we saw in the last series. So maybe he is going to listen to this podcast, like Jimmy said in a couple podcasts ago.
He won't
and be
do
like,
that.
Maybe this will work, and throw it against the wall, like you said, Jimmy, and see if it sticks. But
this is exactly what I didn't want to happen. I said I didn't want to spend too much time on this, and look what I did. Look what I did.
And the other thing, Jimmy, is that at the start of the second quarter, they have both Xavier Tillman Sr. and Al Horford out there. Like, that's tough to play Max Strus as a small ball 4 in that kind of situation.
He was just guarding a bunch of giants against Orlando. Like, it's no matter what. No matter what we do, it's for sure. These giants they got a little bit more.
A little bit more bulk.
Foundation.
Got a little bit more
they got a little bit more foundation to him. Yeah. But like, again, it's going poorly anyways. So why not?
Might as well try. If it is broke, do fix it, please. That's what Jimmy is saying. All right. So we've made it to the third quarter. And this is where things get interesting, because we know Donovan Mitchell has been searching for a running mate this entire playoffs. And we've talked about how Darius Garland has needed to step up. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell combined for 7 3-pointers in the third quarter. 7. That's a big step from what they've done in the past. And also knowing that Darius Garland bumped somebody, hit somebody, hurt himself, hobbled himself down the court, got the ball, and looked away, got the pass out. Then he got the ball back because nobody else was open, had time to look at the rim, look at his knee, look up and say, well, I guess I'm shooting it, and shot it, and it went in. Like, for me, the toughness of Darius Garland to grow in that aspect and be able to not ask for a sub, say that I know I need to be on the court for our team to be successful if I'm playing in my highest caliber. And a little bit, because this is something that I learned when I was a younger athlete, that sometimes when you're hurt or sometimes when you're sick, you're not thinking about all of the mechanics when you're shooting or playing or whatever. You're just letting your body do what it's naturally been taught to do with the thousands of reps that he's did. And when that ball hit bottom, I was like, oh boy, because if he just gets muscle memory going, we know that, like I said on the last podcast, he's in there somewhere. So, Chris, let me know what you thought of DG and Donovan getting going together, how they were hyping each other up, how Darius was able to respond to another injury that he might have sustained against the Boston Celtics. I don't know why that's a trend, but what did you think about that third quarter from this team?
Well, I thought it was really, really good because I thought they took advantage of some of the opportunities that they had against the Celtics team. And I think we came into this series and we talked about some of the things that were going to be available to the Cavs. Donovan Mitchell in ISO situations, attacking switches, attacking matches, having more space out on the perimeter. Same thing when it comes to Darius Garland. So being able to see both of those guys simultaneously be able to capitalize on the opportunities that were in front of them, that was encouraging. Seeing Darius go out there and have confidence with his shot and understanding that, Al Horford's going to be in a drop. If Luke Cornett's going to be playing, he's going to be in a drop, and that's going to give him space to get to those threes. He stepped into it with confidence. And Darius talked to me the other day just about the difference that he thinks there's going to be in this series with Boston compared to Orlando. And Boston's not as physical on the perimeter. And that's, no sign of disrespect or anything along those lines. But they're not as grabby. They're not as physical. They aren't pestering Darius the same kind of way. I don't know that Boston's defenders are going to bother Darius the same kind of way out on the perimeter, make him look as uncomfortable as he did at times in the Orlando series. And the same thing when it comes to Donovan Mitchell. It just feels like to me that in the third quarter kind of showed this, there is a level of freedom that both of these guys are feeling now that they're playing against the Celtics, who just, they're not the same kind of dogged defenders as Orlando. There's not the same kind of size issue that the Cavs are feeling. It just feels like to them that there's more space and they're kind of unshackled playing against the Celtics compared to the Magic.
Drew Holiday's a pretty big dude, but I am confused. I understand drop coverage, playing below the level to try and entice a drive. I don't understand why Drew Holiday was in position to contest 2 Darius Garland 3-pointers tonight and just didn't. Like, he was there and he just watched Darius Garland shoot a 3-pointer. That was very confusing to me. I don't know. Again, like we've been saying, Darius Garland is in there somewhere. I don't know if the Celtics don't agree with that. I don't know if they're just trying him, but they were defending him really weird tonight in certain moments, and he took advantage. But I will continue to say, you got to shoot the ball more. Like, when he catches fire like that, again, I know this game, like the last game, where some of these numbers are going to be a little bit lower because everyone got pulled out a little bit earlier. 5 for 8, 4 for 5. You're Darius Garland. You're 4 for 5 from the 3. You better shoot 10. And I think there will be opportunities for him to do that. I don't think that Drew Holiday is going to stare at Darius Garland while he shoots threes very many more times in this series. But like Chris is saying, the opportunities are still going to be there for you to walk into a pull-up 3. So this could be a huge turning point for Darius in the series. One other thing I want to say about the third quarter, Tristan Thompson gave some really important minutes after Evan Mobley picked up his 4th foul. When the game, I think the game was in that 7-9 range when that happened later in the third quarter. And it was kind of, I think we all understood how important that moment was for the Cavs. It ended up being, they played them even, and then Donovan hit the buzzer beating 3 to make it a +3 during that stint. And Tristan Thompson was just battling. Picked up the classic Tristan Thompson stay here foul, where he would have gotten the offensive rebound, but they were grabbing him, so they didn't get it. He had one play at the other end. I'm trying to remember who it was. Someone was trying to either pass or get a shot, and Tristan, I think, just snatched it from him. So I think we have, I don't know, George Niang, we don't need to talk about it anymore. We don't need to talk about it anymore. I said we don't need to talk about it anymore. Did George Niang get backed down by Drew Holiday from the elbow into under the basket? Yes, that happened. We're not talking about that right now. But I think we know Tristan Thompson is the backup center going forward. We know that.
Yeah. So first things first, we're talking about you saying Darius Garland needs to shoot more. I'm going to give you a stat that's going to make you say that he should have shot more again, because Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland were 7 of 8 from 3 in that third quarter. Darius Garland was 3 of 3. Donovan was 4 of 5. That is astounding numbers. 1. 2. Tristan Thompson, I remember going back to the Orlando series again. I know we're just in game 2, whatever. But I just remember the Orlando Magic basically playing tip drill over over Cavalier rebounders in that series. And that's what it felt like Tristan Thompson was doing by himself in that third quarter. Just tipping the ball to himself, tipping the ball out. I remember one time Max Strus, Isaac Okoro came in and grabbed the rebound after Tristan had tipped it. And that's all you need. An offensive board is so huge. It doesn't matter if you end up getting the stat line, but the effort that he put in and the veteran leadership, like they knew that they needed him to be in that stuff. And you saying that, Jimmy, Jason Tatum literally held Tristan Thompson to the ground, trying to prevent him from getting another offensive board because they understood the momentum that brought. So I think Tristan Thompson did a great job in that third quarter. Again, that's probably why I'm more lenient to say that he could have started the second quarter because of what we saw. Who knows, Chris? I know. Who knows if it would have gave the same result? I don't know, but I think that just shows like how he can impact games, not even scoring or anything like that, just on the rebounding aspect of it. And yeah, so now we're to the fourth quarter, and all I want to talk about is when we got about 5-6 minutes in or whatever, and I'm trying to bang it away, trying to get my buzzer story ready, and I look up, and all I hear is Chris say, "White flag." And I was like, well, that's a wrap. All right. So, Chris, what did it mean for you to see the Boston Celtics, the team that came into the playoffs, supposedly the best team in the NBA, waving the white flag to the Cleveland Cavaliers with 5 minutes left and their fans were leaving the arena?
Meant nothing. Honestly. Doesn't matter if you win by 24, doesn't matter if you win by 5, doesn't matter if you win by 1. Things don't carry over in the playoffs. We saw that from game 1 to game 2 with the Cavs, right? It looked like they were outclassed, they were out physical, they were out toughed, they were out everything in that game against the Celtics. None of it mattered when you went into game 2. The Cavs figured some things out. They made adjustments. They played better. They executed better. Their attention to detail was better. Their focus was better. Their intensity was better. All that stuff. And I don't think that just because the Cavs were able to silence a crowd and win by 24, that changes the Celtics' level of belief in their locker room. I don't think it means anything going into game 3, except for the fact that the Cavs did what they needed to do by going to Boston and getting a series split. And now it's 1-1 going back to Cleveland. And I think everybody understands the kind of environment that it's going to be at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. And obviously the Cavs found some things that they could exploit with the Celtics, which was really, really smart. And it worked well enough for them to win game 2. But just because the Celtics had a bunch of nobodies, end of bench guys in the game at the end of game 2, it doesn't mean that they get bonus points or anything like that moving forward. So it was a great performance by the Cavs, and they deserve all the credit for the way that they played both offensively and defensively. It did not feel like this was a fluky one-off performance where they just got really, really hot from three-point range and the Celtics missed a whole bunch of wide open threes. It did not feel like that at all. It felt like a dominant performance, dominant two-way performance by the Cavs. The kind of performance that I think a lot of people were wondering if Cleveland could even have against this caliber opponent. Now we're going to see sort of what Boston is made of. Because, look, we talked about it coming into this series, guys. Boston is prone to this kind of game, right? They're prone to missing a bunch of three-pointers, to not being as crisp on the offensive end of the floor, having Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum settle for difficult shots in ISO situations that kind of sabotage the offense. They're prone to just losing focus throughout the course of the game and not giving the supreme effort for all 48 minutes. They are prone to these kinds of things. That's been consistent for them over the last couple of years. The question was, would the Cavs be able to take advantage of that particular game when those kinds of things happen, or some of those things happen? And they did that tonight. And you have to give them a lot of credit. But I think we all understand that Boston is the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference for a reason. Boston won 64 games in the regular season for a reason. And there are plenty of reasons to believe that they're going to be much better than they were going into Game 3. And they're probably going to take the Cavs a little bit more seriously than they did going into tonight.
Their transition defense was just really bad at times tonight, Boston. A couple of like just easy leak outs that Cleveland got turned into easy layups off misses. They talked about after the game how their bad offense can bleed into their defense because it creates transition opportunities. But like the spirit of it, I think kind of creeps into their defense sometimes. They get too bummed out by the fact they're missing shots, and it hurts their defense. There was one, I think Drew Holiday just like fell over backpedaling on one of them, and that led to
an Okoro. Man down.
Yeah, led to an Okoro layup, I think.
Yeah.
Chris is probably right in his very nuanced opinion that it means nothing for the Cavs to win big here. But that's no fun. And I think specifically because why it could mean something is specifically because Boston does do this. They do have games like this, and it has cost them the last couple years. Boston, if we're being honest with like the resume they have, 5 Eastern Conference Finals in the last 7-8 years. Granted, a couple of them were against LeBron teams they had no chance of beating. They should probably have a ring already, this group. Like that team that lost to the Stephen Curry Warriors, that last hurrah for the Warriors dynasty, we think at least. They probably should have won that series. And they probably should have beaten they definitely should have beaten the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. So this team kind of has a reputation, not just for blowing games like this, but blowing series like this because they blow games like this. And so every time this pops up, I just don't know how you don't think about it. Right. And again, the larger, bigger picture numbers say that the Boston Celtics probably not going to shoot 23%. I think it's actually 22.9% from 3-point range again in this series. It might even mean they're going to shoot like 50% from 3 in one of these games in this series. But like we talked about with the Cavs after game 1, if player X misses 10 threes in a row, yeah, probably more likely than not, he's going to make 5 or 6 of the next 10. But if we put humanity onto player X and they miss 10 3-pointers in a row, I think he's going to miss the 11th one too because he's thinking about it. And I think the Boston Celtics, if they come out slow in the first quarter, they're not making their threes again, I bet you it'll creep into their transition defense again. So that's not to say that the series, my opinion on the series has changed. I would learn from my Orlando Magic mistake where I was beat bopping after every game, and I'll probably still ride for Celtics in 5 after this game. But the Cavs planted the seed of a plant that the Celtics have seen many times before, their own ugly series-blowing plant. And I think that means something a little bit.
All right. Before we get into conspiracies and such, I'm going to start my own. No, I'm just kidding. I was watching, as I do, in the Uber ride back. I scroll through X, formerly Twitter, trying to figure out what people are saying about the game and what storylines are being said to talk about on the podcast. And I believe, if I saw it correctly, Stephen A. Smith said that the Boston Celtics just showed how vulnerable they are. And I think that's a good way to put it because they, like you said, Chris, they have struggled in situations like this. They are prone to do things like this and are also known for letting series get away from them. But what I wanted to talk about before we get into the preview of Game 3, which is going to be really quick, did you think that the Cavs had a different swagger tonight in TD Garden? It felt like I saw Donovan Mitchell come out before the fourth quarter, and the arena's PR system is playing music. I forget what song it was. And the crowd is cheering for the Celtics, and Donovan Mitchell's in his own world. He's just bopping along to the music, and he like turns to somebody and goes, "Yeah, yeah," and everybody on the Cavs just seemed to be like in their own little zone, and that's not something we saw in Orlando when they traveled to Orlando in last series. Did you feel like they had a different vibe to them on the road in today's game?
Well, they were up 12 going into the fourth quarter. I just think when you're playing well and you're feeling yourself and you sense the other team either one, not playing well, two, struggling with execution against your particular game plan, it's a lot easier to play with that level of joy and that level of swagger.
In the words, I don't want to mess up this quote, in the words of a great modern day philosopher, Luka Doncic, everybody want to act tough when they up. I think that's what he said after the, what was that, Game 5 of the Phoenix Suns series a couple of years ago? Something like that. So yeah, to Chris' point, it's a lot easier when you're making shots. Donovan did give after one of those threes, he gave like a tack it on to the crowd or something, pointed at somebody, I think. He was having fun with the crowd. But yeah, the swagger is defined by how the game's going.
I get that, and you're obviously right, but I'm feeling like 12 points isn't a whole lot, especially Donovan Mitchell, who was like, be quiet to the Cavs fans that were talking about we want Boston in Game 7 when they were up big. He said it's not over yet. So for him to kind of act like that on road territory felt a little different to me, but maybe I'm looking into it a little too much. But let's get into Game 3, which is going to be at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, coming series tied 1-1. And this is what the Cavs are so excited about. Everybody in the locker room was talking about it. They cannot wait to get back to the Rocket. Like, Isaac Okoro and Darius Garland were making barking noises, getting so excited about it, trying to figure out how live the Rocket was going to be on the next game. Like, it's going to be insane. It's going to be crazy. We knew what it was in Game 1 of the Orlando Magic series when Max Strus compared it to the NBA Finals. Now this is Boston. This is a team that the Cavs fans know and hate. So, what do you expect?
Maybe not in that order. Maybe hate and know.
Fair. Jimmy, what are you expecting to be in the arena? How do you expect it to be when you get there for that game, for Game 3?
Hateful. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of energy towards the stars. Like, I think there's gonna be some talking to Jason Tatum if he has another rough night. By the way, I know that Isaac Okoro has gotten some of this too, but I want to highlight Max Strus. Max Strus has done a really good job in the possessions where I've seen him force Jason Tatum into some really tough shots in the series. I think in general, that's probably gone a little bit underlooked. Is again, Max Strus shorter than like everybody on the court against the Magic, and now they have him guarding 6'10" Jason Tatum sometimes, and I think Tatum is playing into it a little bit. I think he's taken his shot selection's been kind of weird, but Max Strus has done a very good job of making sure his presence is felt, and he's very animated with his contests. He's really trying to swipe a hand by your face. I like that. Anything you can do to throw a shooter after him. But yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. I'm sure everyone will be wearing the same colored shirt. What colored shirt, I do not know yet, but I think it'll probably be another notch, not just because we're another round in the playoffs, not just because the Cavs have life in this series, though I think that helps a lot. But I think like all the memories that Boston conjures up, I mean, like this goes people on the broadcast, they were talking because Richard Jefferson was calling the game. They were talking a lot about like the second iteration of LeBron playing against the Celtics, which was like none of those series were really competitive except for the last one, the game 7, when I think that was Tatum's rookie year. But like the Isaiah Thomas Celtics were not a serious threat. I go back to like the Celtics were the last team that LeBron played as a Cav before he went to Miami, man. Like those series had some stakes and there was real like tension in the air when those games were being played, man. So this goes back quite a while, and Cavs fans are not going to forget about that. They are going to bring the energy, and they are going to let the stars know if they're not playing well.
I think everybody knows what the environment's going to be like. I mean, come on now. The Cavs took a game on the road against Boston. They're coming back to Cleveland. The series is tied at 1 game apiece. It's the Eastern Conference semifinals. It's Boston. There's a chance that Dean Wade's going to be back in the lineup. That means no George Niang. I'm sure the fans are going to be really, really pumped about that. You just combine it all together, and I think you understand that it's going to be a chaotic environment. It's going to be a true home court advantage. In saying that, the Cavs are going to have to play well so that the fans stay on their side and that the fans have something to cheer for and the fans have a reason to get rowdy and get on top of the Boston Celtics and make things difficult on the Celtics as well. So I think a good start, this goes without saying, it's like, no duh, dude. Game 3, the Cavs getting off to a good start, putting pressure on the Celtics and getting the crowd into it and giving them a reason to start buzzing quickly and creating such a raucous environment would obviously be really, really beneficial for the Cavs. So it's going to be up to them to do that. They've got to do their part. Also, I don't think we talked enough about Evan Mobley and how great he was tonight. I mean, that
Agreed.
was one of, man, there aren't a lot of guys in the NBA that can do it that way on both ends against that caliber opponent. And, Evan has taken a lot of heat about, you got to stop calling him a unicorn, and he hasn't developed at all on the offensive end of the floor, and he can't shoot jumpers, and he has no three-pointer. Like, come on. That was a double-double. That was protecting the rim, anchoring the defense, being the mouthpiece of the defense, while at the same time being a dominant, forceful player on the inside when it came to the offensive end of the floor. Not every single one of his shots were alley-oop dunks or something like that, or layups. He took a rebound and he started his own little mini break and he bowled into Al Horford for a baby hook. He had a nice feathery touch on a 7-footer. He took advantage of switches and mismatches. Like, this is a 22-year-old kid that is playing his 3rd playoff series in his entire career. And he was one of the most impactful players on a court that featured Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. Like, think about that. It was an awesome performance at a time that the Cavs absolutely needed it. And I also think tonight kind of spotlighted how much the Celtics obviously miss Kristaps Porzingis. He makes Boston a cheat code. Without him, they're obviously a little bit more vulnerable at both ends of the floor. But that's not Evan's fault that Kristaps isn't out there. He still has to go out there and take advantage of him not being there. And he did that. It was just a dominant performance by a guy who has been criticized way too much, I think, nationally.
Used him as a passing hub at times too, right? Like 5 assists,
Yeah,
I think.
5
I think
assists.
4 of those came 4 in the first quarter, I think.
Yeah.
Or very early on. Evan Mobley had at half, what did he have at half? Like 15, 7 and 5, something like that. He had 7 games like that during the regular season. Like That's how much he stepped up in this game. He should, like, as we mentioned, the passing had the really nice the chemistry that you have to show. Like Karras and him had a nice little play where Karras faked like he was going to come get a handoff and then beat, I think it was Peyton Pritchard backdoor, and Evan threw a nice bounce pass for a layup there. That's really impressive. The way that he attacks, the way that I think on one of these other plays where he was bringing the ball up, it was maybe it was Karras again, where he just threw a hit ahead that turned into a layup. That's really impressive. The way he punished switches, like that's something I'm really looking at, because that's the kind of thing that might change the way Boston defends him. I'm not saying that Boston's going to stop switching. I would say that they would show him more defensive attention in those moments, which could create open shots for other people. The biggest thing, this is a really small thing. He made the 3-pointer in the first half. He made the 3-pointer. If you go back and watch, Donovan Mitchell is clapping for that ball. And Evan Mobley is standing within earshot. He knows Donovan Mitchell wants that ball. He's like, nope, I'm letting this thing fly. And he drilled it. The last 4 games, we made a lot of, rightfully so, 2 threes that Evan hit in the game 1 of Orlando. I think he might have made, if he made any after that, he might have made 1 after that, and he didn't take any in the final 4 games of that Orlando series. So I'm not saying Evan Mobley is going to be making a bunch of threes in this series. I'm just saying that moment right there shows you how much of a step forward he took in his own head today. That is supreme confidence to take that shot and make it when the best player on your team is clapping for the ball aggressively.
I think 2 things go without saying. 1, you cannot forget that he also heat checked almost immediately after from 3.
In and out. It went out. It wasn't a bad shot. It was in and out.
It was not a bad shot at all. I'm just saying that you're talking about confidence. That's exactly what I'm trying to harp on there. And I saw like a bunch of people commenting on that on social media saying, I did not have Evan Mobley heat checking on my first quarter bingo card for the Cavs. But the other point that we have to talk about briefly, but goes without saying, Evan Mobley stepping up with Jared Allen out is huge for this Cavs team. We're not talking, we knew he was going to do it on the defensive end, but doing it on the offensive end and also doing it on the boards. Because when Jarrett was there, Jarrett was the main source of rebounding. He had 38 rebounds in the first 2 games of the first round series. Like, ridiculous. Evan Mobley going back to back double doubles is a big sign for him and his growth. Obviously, it's a different team. He has more opportunities to go up and get the ball. He has more length than a lot of people on the floor most of the time, but his know-how to go and get it and being able to be active on that end has been really important, especially because we don't know when Jared Allen is coming back or if he is coming back in this series. But the one dude that we can potentially see coming back soon, Dean Wade, who's continued to get more reps. He was out there before the game today, which I thought was kind of big because I don't think he's done that before coming back, because he didn't do it in games 1 and he didn't do it in game 1. But I think that's big, and I think that he could play another part of what the Cavs got going on. And as fans are calling him now, he's the Celtics killer. So we'll have to see what all goes down in game 3. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to subscribe to Subtext. We'll be hitting you with all the inside information, and I'm going to keep saying it until he doesn't get it first. Chris Fedor will let you know if Dean Wade is going to play in game 3. You don't want to miss it. So,
I have a prediction. The injury report's going to come out tomorrow. It's going to come out probably around 5:30. Dean Wade will be listed as questionable. That is my prediction.
Ooh. Spicy. But
we'll see.
If you want to get the confirmation text, but If you want to get the confirmation text whether Dean is playing or not, subscribe to Subtext, sign up for a 14-day free trial, or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.